Waited 2 years for a heart source, but my husband transplanted it to the fake heiress, Lila. The doctor said I only had 1 week left to live, so I decided to have my body cryogenically frozen. I donated my body to Lila's studio. The day I signed the donation form, my son threw himself into my arms and said that Mommy and Auntie were finally reconciled. My parents praised me for finally understanding sisterly affection and helping each other. My husband said with relief that I had finally let go of my grudges and become understanding. I smiled softly. Yes, I've really learned my lesson this time. I'm going to return the Vaughn family's heiress identity to Lila and fulfill all of you. Your time is running out. Next, say goodbye to your family properly. The attending doctor's tone was gentle, with a hint of heartache, but it was like a boulder crashing down on my heart. Even though I had guessed the outcome long ago, I still couldn't help but cry when I was sentenced to death. I'm only 28 years old, and I've been working hard to survive. But I never thought that the heart source I finally got would be snatched away by my husband. He transplanted it to the fake heiress, Lila, who only had a slight heart weakening. I stumbled to Lila's ward and saw my parents, my husband Julian, and my son Caleb all gathered around her, showering her with care. Seeing me enter, Julian, who was originally feeding Lila water, immediately put down the water glass and walked over, asking, "What did the doctor say?" I looked at him, and he immediately avoided my eyes guiltily, stammering an explanation. It was an emergency at the time. If Lila didn't get a heart transplant, she would have died in agony. My mother immediately said, "Julian is right, Serafina. Life is paramount. You wouldn't be so unreasonable as to be angry with us about this, would you?" The words that were about to come out swirled around my lips before I said calmly, "I'm not angry. The doctor said there will be good news in a week." After a pause, I added, "Good news for all of us." Julian pushed up the gold-rimmed glasses on his nose. A pair of amorous eyes instantly dyed with a smile. A suitable heart source so quickly? I knew the decision that day was right. My father also breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. Our Lila is blessed. If the heart source hadn't been given to her, she definitely wouldn't have been able to wait a week. My mother nodded repeatedly, gently tucking the stray hair at Lila's temples behind her ear, and said, "Our Lila's blessings are still to come." Unlike some people who could have continued to wait for a heart source, but insisted on making a scene, causing our Vaughn family to lose all face. Even though I was already disappointed in them, my heart still ached at this moment. I clenched my skirt tightly to stem the tide of sadness that wanted to burst through my eyes. Julian looked at me tenderly, but the words he spoke made me shiver. "You were indeed too impulsive that day. I think you should apologize to Lila." I looked at him in disbelief. Lila stole my heart, and now I'm being told to apologize to her? My mother chimed in. "Yes, and if you hadn't bullied Lila that day, she wouldn't have had angina at all. You should be grateful that she's lying here comfortably now. Otherwise, I would never recognize you as my daughter in this lifetime." I remembered that day. Lila stood in front of me, proudly showing off the marks on her neck, boasting about how much Julian cherished her, and how unable he was to restrain himself. I couldn't help but slap her. They happened to see it. Julian rushed forward angrily and pushed me away. I was pushed to the ground, and in the midst of the dizziness, my mother rushed up to fight me. My father just stood indifferently not far away, as if he also felt that I deserved to be taught a lesson. Immediately afterwards, I had a heart attack, and Lila also clutched her heart and said it hurt. But everyone thought I was faking it, and that she was the real one. Thinking of this, I bitterly tugged at the corner of my mouth and said faintly, "I'm sorry, it was my fault." No one expected me to apologize so obediently. Julian's gaze at me carried a hint of scrutiny. Lila also furrowed her delicate brows, revealing an expression of, "How can you be such a good actress?" My parents looked at me warily, as if afraid I would cause trouble again. Only my son Caleb happily rushed into my arms and said, "Mommy, that's great, you finally admitted your mistake. Don't bully Auntie anymore in the future. Otherwise, I'll dislike you as much as Grandpa and Grandma do." I lowered my eyes and looked at him. I could tolerate the coldness, misunderstanding, and favoritism of my parents and husband. But him, the child I carried for 10 months, also favoring Lila, this was something I couldn't tolerate. But I didn't have the strength to argue anymore. I gently stroked his face and said with a smile, "Mommy will listen to you." Only then did my mother nod in satisfaction and say, "Well, it seems, Serafina, you've finally learned your lesson." Julian also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "My wife has grown up." Looking at his affectedly doting appearance, I only felt a wave of nausea in my chest. Just then, Lila suddenly cried out, "It hurts so much," and Julian immediately rushed over. My son, who was just hugging me, also let go and ran over, shouting, "Auntie, where does it hurt? Caleb will blow on it for you." My parents' eyes turned red with heartache. Standing far away at this moment, I was like a clown. I couldn't stand this atmosphere any longer. I used being tired as an excuse and turned to leave the ward. As soon as I reached the door, the pain in my heart almost made me faint. I leaned against the wall and squatted down, quickly found the strong painkiller, and swallowed several pills in a row before it subsided. Inside the ward, I heard my mother still scolding my coldness. She felt that I didn't care about Lila. But I knew that as long as I was there, Lila would be uncomfortable. This was her usual tactic for competing for attention. But in reality, she didn't need to do this at all, because from beginning to end my parents, husband, and son loved her, the fake heiress. And me, like the name my parents gave me, Serafina. Do not seek. They never thought of finding me, so when I took the initiative to come to their door to recognize them, they gave me such a name. After leaving the hospital in a daze, I took a taxi to Lila's research studio. I had already made an appointment with them to donate my body for their cryogenic revival experiments. When signing the agreement, the staff asked, "Ms. Vaughn, do your parents and loved one know about your decision?" I smiled and said faintly, "They all respect and support my decision." The staff member said enviously, "That's great. Your family must love you very much, so they hope you will have a chance to be revived one day." Looking at her envious gaze, I felt like I had really become a woman deeply loved by her parents and loved one. The corners of my mouth involuntarily curved upwards, and I said with a smile, "Yes, who doesn't love their family?" Saying that, I handed over the agreement. After confirming that everything was correct, I left here and returned home. As soon as I entered the door, I saw my things piled up in the living room. I frowned and looked at Ms. Rosa, who was standing there directing everyone. How could she be here? Miss Rosa, like my parents, hated me, the real heiress. Seeing me, she said with a fake smile, "Serafina, Lila is being discharged from the hospital today. Mr. Sterling asked me to take care of her, and also asked me to choose a room for her to recuperate. I think the master bedroom is well ventilated in both the north and south, so I tidied up the master bedroom for Lila to recuperate. The other rooms in the villa are all in use, so I'll have to trouble you to live in the storage room downstairs." I said faintly, "Okay." Miss Rosa probably didn't expect me to be so easy to talk to. All the words she had in mind were swallowed back. She looked at me suspiciously and asked, "Serafina, aren't you angry?" I shook my head and turned to walk towards the storage room. Miss Rosa said disdainfully, "It seems Serafina has really become sensible. It would have been better if she had been like this earlier. If she had been like this earlier, the master and madam wouldn't have hated you so much." I didn't say anything. When I arrived at the storage room, a pungent musty smell hit my nostrils. The narrow space was filled with all kinds of things. There was only a small bed 1 meter wide, with half of it covered with books, and the other half empty. I lay down directly and fell into a daze, falling asleep. I was too tired and just wanted to get a good night's sleep. But unexpectedly, even such a small wish could not be fulfilled. I don't know how much time passed, but I was woken up by a strong force. When I opened my eyes, I saw Julian's eyes, which were filled with panic. Seeing me wake up, his originally worried eyes instantly turned cold, and he loudly questioned me. "Why did you post our marriage to the internet? Do you know that many people are now cyberbullying Lila? Lila just had surgery, and her body is already fragile." Because of this, she became so anxious that she fainted. "I thought you had really learned your lesson. It turns out you were just secretly planning how to get revenge on us." I only felt as if there was a large hammer in my head, hammering away frantically. The intense pain made it difficult for me to hear his words clearly. I could only weakly say, "I didn't do anything. If you don't believe me, you can look at my phone." Julian roared angrily. Enough! Those reporters have admitted that you gave them money to publicize this matter. How much longer are you going to keep pretending? Come with me now, and kneel down to apologize to Lila. Julian roughly yanked me off the bed, dragging me out. He was moving too fast, and my leg slammed hard into the doorframe with a thud, the pain making me tremble instantly, but he only glanced back at me before continuing to drag me out. Arriving in the hall, he threw me hard onto the floor. I felt as if every bone in my body was about to fall apart. Just as I was about to stand up, my mother rushed over and slapped me several times. A bloody stench, like rot that the manhole cover couldn't contain, bubbled upward. I looked up and saw Lila hiding in my father's arms, crying pathetically, while my mother stared at me with a ferocious expression. Her dark eyes were filled with disgust and hatred for me, as if hacking me to pieces wouldn't be enough to appease her. Perhaps my gaze was too cold, as my mother raised her hand to slap me again. I couldn't hold it back any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood sprayed all over her hands and face, causing her to pause in shock. Her hand stopped on my face, as if gently caressing me. I couldn't help but greedily rub my cheek against her hand, and tears streamed down my face. I also longed for my mother to caress me like she caressed Lila, instead of always using cold slaps to vent her disgust towards me. My mother recoiled as if she had been electrocuted. I collapsed wearily, blood also starting to flow from my nose. Julian rushed forward in a panic, anxiously asking, "What's wrong? Why are you vomiting so much blood?" I looked at him, his hands trembling, as if he was genuinely worried about me. I pushed away his hand that was reaching out to help me. Just as I was about to get up, I started vomiting blood again in large gulps. A hint of fear finally appeared in my mother's eyes. She shook her head and said, I only slapped her a few times, I didn't do anything." After saying that, she asked me with rare concern, "Serafina, what's wrong?" Mom will take you to the hospital right away." My father also came over and asked, "What happened? Quickly help Serafina up." My son Caleb also rushed over, crying loudly, "Mom, you're bleeding so much. Are you going to die?" My mother snapped, "Don't talk nonsense." At this moment, Ms. Rosa suddenly came out, holding a package in her hand, and said angrily, "Serafina, how could you use a blood bag to scare the Madam and Mr. Sterling?" Blood bag? What blood bag? Before I could understand, my mother had already rushed in front of Ms. Rosa. After looking at what Ms. Rosa was holding, she smashed it on the ground in uncontrollable rage. She angrily scolded, "Serafina, you are indeed cunning, actually trying to use a blood bag to deceive our sympathy." I smiled bitterly and shook my head. I had clearly learned to be obedient, so why wouldn't they let me go? Julian squatted down, looking at me with disappointment, and said, "Serafina, how did you become like this?" My father angrily returned to Lila's side, saying with disgust, "Ungrateful daughter. She really is a wild child from the countryside, unscrupulous and cold-blooded. Not even half as good as our Lila. No, you can't even compare to a single hair on Lila's head." I didn't say anything, just forcibly swallowing the blood that was about to come out. Caleb, who was originally in my arms, now pushed me away with disgust. He frowned and said, "Mom, I thought you had changed, but you're so bad, I don't like you anymore." As he spoke, he ran to Lila's side and lay on her lap, saying, "I want Auntie to be my mom." My heart was as dead as ashes. I clenched my hands desperately. Even though the palms of my hands had been pierced by my fingernails, it still didn't stop my tears. Julian sighed, reached out and wiped away my tears, and asked, "You also know that it doesn't feel good to be betrayed by the people closest to you. But why did you do that kind of thing? Now Lila's reputation is ruined, and our company's stock is also fluctuating. All of this is because of you, so you must not only apologize, but also take compensatory measures." I wanted to say that I didn't know anything, but Lila started crying. She sobbed, "Forget it, Julian. Sister has hurt me repeatedly. I'm afraid that if I make her apologize again, she will only hate me more. Although I don't know why sister hates me so much, but I am willing, for the sake of mom and dad, for the sake of brother-in-law, not to hold it against her." My mother said with heartache, "Lila, you are just too kind. That's why you are bullied by her. Don't worry, Mom and Dad will always be on your side. With us protecting you, she will never have another chance to hurt you. After saying that, she looked at me with a cold face and said, Listen carefully, for the reputation of our Vaughn family and Sterling family, both of our families have discussed a solution. You and Julian will go divorce tomorrow, and then he will get a marriage certificate with Lila. We will announce to the public that Julian and Lila have already gotten married, but because your health was not good, and you liked him, you have been hiding it from you. I looked at Julian and asked, Do you also agree? Julian avoided my gaze, frowned, and said impatiently, This is also a helpless situation. Who asked you to cause the trouble? After a pause he said, But don't worry, we are just doing this as an expedient measure. When the storm passes, I will divorce Lila. I looked at him, and for a moment didn't know what to say. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty, or perhaps because he felt that my silence was a kind of resistance, which made him very unhappy. He said with a cold face, Whether you agree or not, I will. I slowly opened my mouth and said, Congratulations to you, congratulations on your marriage. Julian's voice stopped abruptly. He stared blankly at me, feeling an unspeakable panic in his heart. He felt that the current me was like a very light piece of white paper, which could be blown by the wind to a place he couldn't see at any time. I slowly got up, supported myself against the wall and wiped the blood off my face, and looked at my mother and said, Julian and I didn't get a marriage certificate. So he can directly get a marriage certificate with Lila? My mother asked with some surprise, You didn't get a marriage certificate? Julian's face was very ugly. He frowned and explained, I was very busy before, and then I forgot. My mother clapped her hands and said, It's good that you didn't get a marriage certificate. My son Caleb glanced at me timidly and asked, Then in the future Auntie will be my mother? I nodded to him and said with a smile, Happy? Caleb jumped up happily and said, That's great, Auntie will be my mom in the future. After saying that, as if afraid that I would be unhappy, he added, Mama, no, Aunt, as long as you promise not to bully Auntie anymore, I will still like you. I lowered my eyes and said in a low voice, Understood. Lila cried with joy and asked, Is Sister really willing to let Julian marry me? I said calmly, Yes, don't call him brother-in-law anymore in the future. Lila glanced at Julian shyly. She thought Julian would be happy, but found that he was just staring at me. She clenched her sleeves tightly and hid the jealousy in her eyes. When she raised her eyes again, her eyes were only full of innocence. She said sincerely, Thank you, sister. I shook my head and said lightly, We are all family, there's no need to be so polite. Besides, I will have to rely on you to take care of me in the future. Lila didn't know that I had already donated my body to the studio where she worked. She thought I was just being polite, and immediately said with a smile, We are sisters, I will definitely take care of sister. My mother was satisfied when she saw that we had reconciled, and nodded. That's right, if you had been so sensible earlier, why would your father and I be angry with you? I looked at her and wanted to ask her, Am I really not sensible? Clearly I am the Vaughn family's daughter, but everyone thinks I am the Emo family's adopted daughter. Clearly Julian insisted on marrying me in the first place, but everyone thinks I am a hateful third party. Clearly I have taken care of them, father and son, without a name or title and without any complaints, but everyone thinks I am tyrannical and ruthless. I slowly closed my eyes and forced back the surging tears. I didn't want to cry in front of them anymore, because I knew that if I cried, Lila would cry even harder. At that time, even my tears would become a mistake. When I opened my eyes again, I felt that my always painful heart seemed to be completely numb, like an old clock, completely stopped running. I looked at Julian and saw that he had been looking at me, with some pity in his eyes. This feeling made me feel ridiculous, and I asked in a low voice, Can I go back to rest now? Julian nodded and said, Yes, go rest. I breathed a sigh of relief and slowly moved towards the storage room. But my mother said, Pack up and go home. Now there are reporters outside. If everyone finds out that you have been living in your brother-in-law's house, who knows what kind of speculation it will cause? I obediently nodded and said, Okay. My mother asked Julian to send me back home. After going out, he suddenly grabbed my hand and said, I'll accompany you to the operating room in a week. After you finish the surgery, Let's have a good talk. Lila and I. It's definitely not what you think. I looked at Lila's suddenly changed face and smiled at Julian and said, okay. Julian looked at me strangely, as if the person standing before him was just a lifeless piece of wood. He said impatiently, let's go. After getting into the car, it was silent the entire way. Julian tried to speak several times, but when he saw my pale face covered in blood, he lost the desire to talk. Just as the car reached the halfway point, he received a call from my mother. The next moment, he pulled the car over to the side of the road, anxiously saying, Lila suddenly fainted. It might be a severe rejection reaction. I need to get back. Take a taxi yourself. I glanced at the dashboard. It was 3 in the morning. And this was a remote overpass. A taxi? Where would I find a taxi? But I didn't say anything and obediently got out of the car. Before I could steady myself, Julian stepped on the gas and drove off. The roar of the sports car tore at my heart painfully. I clutched my chest and took a long time to escape from that tearing pain. Just as I recovered, there was a muffled thunder in the sky, as if even God couldn't stand my weakness and roared in anger. Before long, large raindrops fell, some hitting the top of my head, and they actually hurt. Hearing the bang 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 sounds, I realized it was hailing. I hurriedly covered my head and walked forward, the hard hailstones constantly hitting my hands and face. It hurt too much. I couldn't help but cry out loud. I didn't want to cry, but the hail really hurt too much. As I walked, I suddenly felt a darkness before my eyes, and I fell to the ground. A long time later, I seemed to hear the sound of an ambulance, and then the familiar voice of the attending physician. He seemed to be crying, constantly questioning. What happened? She clearly had another week to live. How could she suddenly be gone? My ribs hurt so much. Doctor, you seem to be pressing down on me very hard. Are you giving me CPR? But it really hurts. Living hurts so much. Let me go. Patient Serafina died at 5 o'clock in the morning on June 1st, after emergency treatment failed. She was only 28 years old. At the same time, the renowned Artisan Medical Research Institute received her body and implemented cryopreservation technology. When Julian returned to the villa, Lila was still unconscious. He worriedly stayed by her side all night until dawn, when the heavy rain stopped. After a full night's sleep, Lila finally opened her eyes, and then asked in surprise, Julian, when did you get back? Julian smiled and said, I rushed back last night. After the family doctor examined you, he said you were too emotional, your heart wasn't happy, and told me not to disturb your rest. So I didn't wake you up. How do you feel now? Lila smiled and said, I feel much better after sleeping. She looked around and asked with feigned concern, Where's sister? Didn't she come to see me with you? Julian then remembered leaving Serafina on the road last night. When he thought about the strong wind, heavy rain, and hail last night, he felt a little regretful. But then he thought, Serafina was always independent and capable. She was just taking a taxi, there was no need for him to worry. But he didn't know that Serafina's phone was still left in the storage room downstairs. Julian said indifferently, she has surgery in a week and needs to rest, so I told her to go back on her own. Lila nodded obediently, then couldn't help but ask expectantly, Julian, when are we going to get our marriage certificate? Julian frowned slightly, about to decline, but when he met her watery eyes, he couldn't bear it. He said, after your health gets better, we'll go. Lila immediately acted coquettishly. I'm already better, can we go now? Julian pursed his lips, still wanting to refuse. Lila lowered her eyes and said sadly, I'm sorry, I'm making things difficult for you. I'm not trying to force you to take responsibility for me, but I'm too scared. Those people online are saying such terrible things. I'm so scared. So scared everyone will think I'm a dirty interloper. In the past, when Julian heard these words, he would only feel sorry for her. But today he felt something was strange. After all, the two of them had been secretly having an affair for a long time. In fact, what was being said online was the truth. Thinking of this, he rarely said seriously, Lila, what happened between us was just an accident, and I hope you don't develop any greedy thoughts. Lila was slightly stunned. An accident? Which accident happens again and again. She sneered in her heart, but became even more aggrieved on the surface and said weakly, I'm sorry, I know you love sister the most. When this storm passes, I'll give you back to her. Julian felt relieved when he looked at her obedient and understanding attitude. So the two went to secretly get their marriage certificate that same day. Then, both companies jointly released the marriage certificate and clarified the rumors. Soon the online public opinion completely reversed. Julian and Lila became childhood sweethearts that everyone praised and envied, while Serafina was a disgusting adopted daughter who had interfered and suffered from delusions. Although Julian emphasized in the statement that it was his and Lila's concealment that caused Serafina to continue to hold hope for him. However, major marketing accounts still tried their best to create drama, and some even posted the video of Serafina hitting Lila online. For a time, Serafina was condemned by thousands of people. Those who didn't know the truth seemed to have found an outlet for their emotions. It wasn't enough to just scold her, they even went to the Vaughn family to stake out. However, after staking out for 2 days, they didn't see Serafina. They could only film videos of them throwing rotten eggs and rotten vegetables into the yard to vent their anger for Lila. Even more outrageous, someone pulled out a banner cursing Serafina to die a terrible death and hung it at the gate of the Vaughn family villa. Julian was furious when he found out about this. He immediately had those things torn down and strengthened the security in the villa area to prevent those people from disturbing Serafina again. This day, after driving those people away, he came to the gate of the villa. He rang the doorbell several times, but no one opened the door for him. He frowned and looked at the second floor with the windows open, and said loudly, Serafina, I know you're inside. You're not opening the door for me because you're still angry with me, right? I'm sorry, I didn't expect the reaction of the netizens to be so strong. Don't worry, I've already asked the company to do emergency public relations. Soon everyone will forget about this. There was still no sound from inside. Helen had given all the employees a vacation before driving Serafina over, in order to punish her. Julian knocked on the door again, his tone softening a little, and said, Serafina, I know you've been wrong during this time. I've also thought a lot these past few days. I know the reason why you did things to hurt Lila is because we didn't care about you enough. I'll talk to Uncle and Aunt and ask them to be more patient with you. Also, Caleb secretly told me yesterday that he actually likes you a lot. He still wants you to be his mother and wants you to tell him bedtime stories. He said a lot, until his mouth was dry and his patience was exhausted, but the door in front of him remained motionless. He couldn't help but feel a little angry, but when he heard his assistant's words next to him, he broke out in a cold sweat. The assistant asked him worriedly, Mr. Sterling, are you sure Madam is inside? Julian said in a deep voice, as if comforting himself. She has always listened to me the most. If I told her to come back, of course she would come back. Moreover, she sent me a message yesterday saying that she was doing well at home and told me not to worry about her. However, the more he said, the more uneasy he felt. He simply called Helen to ask what the house's password was. Helen had also been feeling uneasy these past few days. She always remembered what Serafina looked like when she first came to the Vaughn family, the dead of winter, but she was only wearing a dirty, patch-thin coat, tattered pants, and thin shoes with exposed toes. Even a beggar in Beijing couldn't be more down and out than her. However, her eyes were very bright, shining so brightly that Helen's heart felt warm. At that time, Helen was indeed heartbroken for Serafina, so she always thought of Serafina first whenever she had something good. But she didn't expect that Serafina's heart was so small that she couldn't tolerate Lila. Lila was a rose that Helen had carefully raised for more than 10 years. How could she bear to send her away? Besides, the Vaughn family was so big, how could it not accommodate a little girl? Helen watched Serafina become more and more arrogant and domineering, even joining other young ladies to ostracize Lila, and she was extremely disappointed. She felt that if Serafina was allowed to continue, she would become scum. Therefore, she became more and more strict with Serafina. She always felt that Serafina's recent good behavior was thanks to her being firm. As she was thinking this, she received a call from Julian. Upon learning that Julian had gone to the Vaughn's house, she immediately became anxious and scolded. Julian, you're being foolish. What time is it? How can you go to my house? If people see you secretly meeting with Serafina, all our efforts will be in vain. Usually when Helen said this, Julian would only feel guilty and apologize, but today he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. No matter what, Serafina was her own daughter. Didn't she have any concern for her at all? He said in a deep voice, Auntie Serafina is my wife. Even if she made a mistake, she has been punished enough. She still needs a heart transplant and will be hospitalized tomorrow. In terms of feelings and reason, I should come and see her. You all like Lila. If even I don't like Serafina, then she would be too pitiful. His assistant heard this and looked at him questioningly, wondering when he had started caring about his wife. Helen was silent for a long time, and then told him the password. After hanging up, Julian's words echoed in her ears, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had really gone too far. At this moment, Arthur walked in and asked, Ms. Rosa, is Lila hungry? Is the bird's nest soup ready? Ms. Rosa, who had been pretending to work while actually observing Helen, was startled by the sudden voice and accidentally knocked over the bird's nest soup she had just brought out. The loud noise also brought Helen, who was lost in thought, back to reality. Helen asked suspiciously, Ms. Rosa, why are you always so absent-minded lately? Ms. Rosa quickly apologized, but her mind flashed back to the image of Serafina frantically vomiting blood on the floor that night. Since that night, she had been having nightmares. In her dreams, Serafina always stood coldly in front of her bed, asking her why she had framed her. Thinking of this, Ms. Rosa shivered. Helen thought she had been too harsh and softened her tone, saying, Recook a pot of bird's nest soup. After a pause she added, 2 pots. I'll take some home to Serafina in the afternoon. Serafina is going to have surgery too, and she needs to nourish herself. Arthur asked in surprise, Have you forgiven her? Helen sighed and asked, Husband, have we been too harsh on Serafina? Now that she has learned her lesson, let's be kind to her and slowly teach her what's right. Arthur nodded and said, I'll listen to you. He didn't actually dislike Serafina that much. After all, Serafina's face was 80% like his. Seeing her was like seeing his younger self. If she hadn't been so disappointing, he wouldn't have treated her coldly and allowed her to be disciplined in order to teach her a lesson. The couple discussed how to make amends to Serafina. Little did they know that Serafina had already been locked in a cryosleep pod. On the other side, Julian entered the Vaughn's house and began frantically searching for Serafina. But even after searching the entire villa, he couldn't find Serafina. He kept calling Serafina, but no one answered. An unprecedented fear crept into his heart like vines. Could it be that something had really happened to Serafina? But just yesterday, she sent him a message saying that she had been obediently reflecting on her actions and told him not to worry about her or come over. How could she disappear today? His assistant cautiously asked, President, should we call the police? Julian pondered for a moment and said, Call the police, and at the same time, release a press release saying that Serafina, after learning the truth, ran away from home out of guilt and has not returned. Also, release the news that she is about to undergo surgery. This way, everyone will think that she really didn't do it on purpose and won't scold her. Oh, and hire some internet trolls to stir things up. Speaking of this, the image of Serafina's bloodless face flashed through his mind. He said guiltily, Serafina must have been very scared when she was cyberbullied. I believe that after this lesson, she will definitely not make this mistake again. The assistant mustered his courage and said, Actually, President, I don't think Madam is that kind of person. Are you really not going to investigate further? Julian asked with a stern face. What do you mean? If it wasn't her, would the reporters be able to frame her for no reason? The assistant didn't dare to say anything more, and quickly went to carry out his instructions. The news quickly went viral. Public opinion also calmed down a lot as Julian had hoped. However, soon, a reply was pushed to the top. Aqua Virtue. Mr. Sterling is so interesting. Wasn't your wife's heart source given to the Vaughn family's adopted daughter, causing her to die tragically? So you don't even know about her death? Initially, the replies below were all, and some people asked if he was someone hired by Serafina to confuse the public. Until he was doxed and revealed to be a doctor. He was even a leading expert in cardiology, and getting an appointment with him was extremely difficult. Aqua Virtue even posted Serafina's medical records along with the hospital's surveillance video. He said, "I originally didn't want to meddle in other people's business. After all, I am just an ordinary person and cannot compete with the Sterling and Vaughn families. But, as a doctor, I can't even protect my own patients. Even the patient's heart source is being taken away. If I don't speak out, I'm afraid her soul will not rest in peace after her death." This video instantly caused an uproar. Because this video not only recorded the process of Julian snatching Serafina's heart source, but also showed Lila provoking me in the hospital with the marks on her neck. Not only that, the doctor also posted Lila's medical records. When everyone saw that she only had suspected early heart failure, they were immediately enraged and filled with righteous indignation. In an instant, everyone angrily rushed to Julian's company, demanding that he explain everything. In the video, Lila kept calling him brother-in-law, and his son kept calling Serafina mom. The crowd immediately understood that they had been tricked by the Vaughn and Sterling families. At this time, the Sterling family. Julian's hand holding the phone was shaking. He repeatedly watched the video. In the video, Lila's usually gentle and innocent face became twisted and hideous. He never knew that the gentle white flower was actually a terrifying flesh-eating flower. Helen and Arthur were the same. At this moment, both of them had red eyes. Helen said in a trembling voice, "Husband, we really misunderstood Serafina. Quickly go and bring Serafina back. I want to tell her that it's Mom's fault. It's Mom's fault." Arthur choked up and said, "I'll call her attending doctor right away. Serafina must be with him. She's angry with us, so she lied to us and said she was dead." "Yes. That must be it." Julian nodded and said, "That's right. She sent me a message yesterday saying that she was fine and told me not to worry. How could she have died 3 days ago?" Helen heard this, and her heart felt relieved. She excitedly asked, "Really?" But as soon as she finished speaking, Arthur and Julian's expressions changed, because they thought of another possibility. At this moment, footsteps came from upstairs. Lila, supported by Ms. Rosa, walked down the stairs step by step. She didn't know about the news on the internet and asked anxiously, "Mom and Dad, I heard that sister is missing. Is it true? I'm so worried about her." The three of them were silent at the same time, just staring at her strangely, as if they wanted to stare a hole through her. Especially Julian, he had never touched Lila. Why would she tell such a lie? Lila felt very uneasy. In the past, Helen would have already picked up the conversation and scolded Serafina for being insensible. But now Helen was just staring at her, looking at her with the same gaze as when she looked at Serafina. Lila asked with some guilt, "Why aren't you saying anything?" She thought to herself, "Could it be that what I did has been found out? Impossible." Just as Helen was about to speak, Julian's assistant rushed in. He said, President, we have found news about Madam." Julian and the others stood up excitedly in an instant. Their eager gazes made the little assistant's scalp tingle. For a moment, he didn't even know if he should say the news. And when Lila saw how nervous they were, jealousy arose in her heart, and she directly pushed Ms. Rosa away, then pretended to stumble and fell from the stairs. But this time, her screams did not attract everyone's attention. Julian didn't even glance at her, but instead asked the little assistant, "Where is Madam? Quickly take me to find her." The little assistant said, Madam has already passed away, and 3 days ago, her body was sent to the time studio. To the studio for cryoresurrection experiments. Just now the studio called me and said that Madam left something there, and asked me to notify you to go and get it." Julian only felt a buzzing in his head, and Helen's eyes rolled back, and she fainted directly. Arthur staggered and shook his head in disbelief. "No, impossible. Clearly she said she had a heart source. How could she die? My daughter is so young. How could she die?" At this moment, Caleb rushed in from school, his eyes red as he ran to Arthur and asked, "Grandpa, who died? Is it Mom? I don't want Mom to die. I don't want Mom to die." Julian looked at his heartbroken son, his face cold as he said to the nanny, "Take the young master upstairs." Then he looked at Lila. Lila was still sprawled awkwardly on the floor, and when she heard Serafina was dead, her heart was filled with joy, because only with Serafina's death would she be the only daughter of the Vaughn family, and everything belonging to the Vaughn family would belong to her. And Julian, no one would be able to fight her for him anymore. Perhaps she was too happy. Lila forgot to restrain her emotions, and instead wore a smile on her face. Until Julian stood in front of her, asking with a cold face, "Your sister is dead and you're happy?" Lila suddenly came to her senses. She hurriedly suppressed her smile and said flusteredly, "How could I be? I don't believe sister is dead. She must be pretending to scare us." But she knew very well that Serafina was indeed dead, because the night before last, she had already received the donor information in the work group. It was Serafina. But because there was no photo, she wasn't sure at first. Thinking of this, Lila started crying again. She held out her wrist for Julian to see, where a piece of skin was scraped off. She said pitifully, "Julian, it hurts so much." Before Julian could speak, Arthur coldly questioned, "Your mother has fainted, but you haven't reacted at all, only caring about that little scratch. Do you even have a heart?" At this time, the little assistant had already given Helen a quick-acting heart pill. But she still hadn't woken up. Yet Lila, whom she loved so dearly, hadn't asked her a single question from beginning to end, only desperately trying to gain Julian's attention. And even used malicious speculation to smear Serafina. Arthur looked at this daughter, stammering, so guilty she couldn't speak, and felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over his heart. He felt like he was only seeing this daughter clearly now. He even began to wonder, were those things Serafina did in the past really done by her? At this moment, a cell phone rang upstairs. Lila immediately said to Ms. Rosa, "Hurry up and get my phone for me." Julian looked up and saw Ms. Rosa standing there with a pale face. Only when his gaze fell on her did she hurry upstairs. However, when she came downstairs, the phone she brought out wasn't Lila's, but Serafina's. Lila's face instantly changed, and Julian directly snatched the phone, questioning loudly, "How did Serafina's phone end up with you?" Miss Rosa instantly knelt on the ground. She had been absent-minded from the beginning, and now, frightened by Julian, she immediately cried out in panic, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have falsely accused you of using a blood bag, but it was all Lila's idea. Please don't come into my dreams again, Serafina. I'll kowtow to you." Lila, her face ashen, said resentfully, "Ms. Rosa, what's wrong with you? Look clearly, where is sister?" The next moment, Julian grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. He gritted his teeth and said, "So those text messages weren't sent to me by Serafina. You sent them to me? You knew she was dead all along. Time Studio, that's the lab you work in? Good. Very good. Lila, you will pay for your viciousness." After speaking, he threw Lila to the ground. Lila gasped for breath in fear, saying painfully, "No. I just didn't want you to go to sister. I really didn't know she was dead. Julian, you have to believe me. You have to believe me." But Julian just kicked her hand away. He said to the bodyguards with a cold face, "Drag them both to the basement." Then he rushed to the lab with Helen and Arthur. Lila was dragged towards the basement, and her parents, who always loved her, didn't give her a single glance. She cried anxiously, "Dad, Mom. Please help me. I really didn't do anything." Helen slowly turned around, her eyes full of hatred, and said, "Lila, I'll never believe you again. You're the beast. If my daughter is really dead, I'll send you to the 18th level of hell to be buried with my daughter." Lila was frightened by Helen's gaze. But she forgot that every time she made a false accusation, she forced Helen to look at her own daughter with such a gaze. Studio. Julian and the others rushed over. When the staff heard their purpose, they instantly said with disdain, "So you're the family members that Ms. Pierce mentioned." Julian and the others felt as if her gaze was like a slow slicing death. Helen asked with red eyes, "Where's my daughter? I want to see my daughter." The staff said coldly, "Your daughter is already in cryogenic sleep. According to the rules, no one can see her. Otherwise, the cryo experiment will be interrupted, and then, she really won't have a chance to come back to life." Helen was so frightened that she immediately waved her hand, saying, "No. Don't interrupt the experiment. I won't see her, I won't see her. Julian had already heard the assistant give a detailed explanation of the experiment on the way, and although he thought it was a fantasy, but as long as there was a millionth of a chance, he didn't want to miss it. He asked with red eyes, my wife. What did she leave me? The staff then handed him an envelope, saying indifferently, according to the rules, every donor will leave their family members a memento. Ms. Pierce only left a letter, take it. Julian took the letter and couldn't wait to open it. However, when he saw the blank letter, he was completely stunned. The letter fell to the ground, and Arthur picked it up, silent after seeing it. Julian covered his face, saying painfully, Do you hate me that much? You wouldn't even leave me a single word. At this time the little assistant ran in again saying, Mr. Sterling, something bad happened. The police are here, saying they want to investigate you for seizing heart sources and wasting resources. And passing cars recorded what happened to the missus before her death. Now the internet is full of people scolding us. Julian didn't speak, he just felt his head spinning, and his ears ringing. His chest ached violently, just like Serafina once did. He clutched his chest tightly, and after a dizzy spell he fainted. When he woke up, Julian's mother, with a worried expression, was by his side, along with Julian's father, who had a cold face. Seeing him open his eyes, before Julian's mother could offer a word of concern, Julian's father said, Look at all the disgusting things you've done. Misjudging people, acting recklessly, using your power to bully others. Because of you, our company's reputation has been ruined. For the sake of the company's reputation, the board of directors has decided to revoke all of your shares and dismiss you from your position as CEO, effective today. Julian looked at his cold father, and suddenly realized that this was what it felt like to be neglected, resented, and disliked by your own parents? But he deserved it. What about his Serafina? She hadn't done anything wrong, so why was she being slandered and hated by her own family? Thinking of this, he burst into tears. Julian's mother said with heartache, Son, don't cry, Mom has shares, Mom will give my shares to you. Julian's father said coldly, If you hadn't spoiled him, would he have committed such a terrible mistake? If you dare to help him, then get out of this house with him. After speaking, he angrily slammed the door and left. Julian's mother still wanted to say something, but Julian said calmly, Mom, I'm tired, can you let me rest alone for a while? Julian's mother left, taking hesitant steps. But as soon as she walked out the door, there was a bang inside, followed by someone shouting, Someone jumped from the building. Julian's mother rushed back to the ward unsteadily, and saw that Julian's bed was empty. She ran to the window and looked out, seeing Julian lying quietly on the cold ground. When the news of Julian's death came, Arthur had already brought Lila home. As soon as Lila entered the door, she saw Helen, as gentle as before, saying, Lila, you're back? Mom made your favorite pigeon soup, come and try it. Lila said guiltily, Mom, you don't blame me? I didn't mean to hide anything from you. I was just afraid that you would be too sad if you knew about Sister's death, so. Helen shook her head, saying faintly, Don't say anything, your sister got what she deserved, it was just her bad luck. From now on, you're our only daughter, you must take good care of your health, understand? Lila instantly breathed a sigh of relief. She knew that even if Serafina died, her parents still loved her the most. She happily took a sip of the soup, looked around and asked, Where's Ms. Rosa? Helen said lightly, Oh, she was sent to a mental hospital by me. Because she always said that your sister comes to her every night to settle accounts. The chopsticks in Lila's hand fell on the table. Helen immediately comforted her. Don't be afraid, these are all nonsense. Lila nodded with a smile. Helen and Arthur kept putting food on her plate. They talked about the fun things from her childhood. Every single thing showed their love for Lila. Lila couldn't help but sigh. Mom and Dad are so good to me. Helen's eyes instantly turned red. She caressed Lila's face, but suddenly applied force. Lila screamed in pain. Helen laughed and cried, asking in a crazed manner, Yes, your dad and I are so good to you, even our own daughter couldn't compare to you. What else are you not satisfied with? Why did you kill her? My daughter is dead. Did you really think I would let you live? Lila pushed Helen away in horror, But Arthur slammed her onto the table. She desperately screamed, "Dad." But Arthur's face was cold. Without the slightest hesitation, he forced the entire bowl of soup down her throat. He gritted his teeth and said, "Serafina didn't leave us any words. Julian has already gone to atone for his sins. It's your turn to go down too." At that moment, footsteps came from upstairs. Helen looked up at Caleb, who was standing at the top of the stairs, and gave him a kind smile. She beckoned to him, saying, "Caleb, come down quickly. Grandma made your favorite pigeon soup for you." Suddenly, the stereo in the living room blared to life, a mournful and deep voice echoing, "We are all sinners committing different sins. I can decide who is right and who should fall asleep."